Okay, now for round two for the supervisors on here. We got to remember that drug testing is best practice for work environments no matter what the industry is. The opioid epidemic and drug use across the country is resulting in an all-time high of unintended overdoses and deaths. Unfortunately, these numbers do continue to rise. Marijuana, although becoming more socially acceptable, does not equate to safe and is often laced with other drugs. And we know that drug testing is important for a safe work environment. I've got stats and stories I could sit here for hours. I won't with those stats and stories. But with the society and culture changing its perception of marijuana use, where does that leave safety? So we do need to make a shift and change our perspective. We do know that implementing drug-free safety programs have saved lives. It's decreased post-accidents. The list goes on and on there. We're not trying to catch bad people. We're not trying to okay, let's look for the problematic person. Let's try to do this, because that is not what we're doing. What we want to do is, make sure that the work environment is safe. And the other thing that I've noticed is a lot of people that do fail their first fail a drug test, they find pathways to recovery. And a lot of people think that if I get caught doing something illegal, I got to go away for 30, 60, 90 days, whatever it is. No, that is not the case. There's many other forms and pathways to recovery on there. There's a guy that was found out when he came in, all he had to do was go to an outpatient, talk with the counselor for a couple hours every week. He didn't realize it. He thought he had to be confined to some type of treatment facility, locked away on some island somewhere. That's not the case on there. Like I said, we're not going to talk about pre-employment. We already did that. We did the follow-up and return to duty. What I am going to talk about is post-accident testing there. And here's the thing. Here's the reason why you're going to request the post-accident. If there's a human fatality, best practice is get everybody involved that was around there, get them all tested. If they have to go off-site for any medical attention, whether it's to an immediate care, emergency room, anything like that, they do need to have that done. Do believe that it's still $500 property damage here for the city. Or if the supervisor feels that drugs or alcohol may have contributed to having that accident. That person had that accident due to the fact that you can document why you think that's true. You can test for that there. So here's the thing about with non-DOT accidents there. You're still able to test for an accident that could have been the result of use on the job. You do have that policy in effect. Here's the thing about that. Drug tests need to be done as quickly as possible. You only have 8 hours for a breath alcohol test to be administered after somebody was involved in an accident. You have 32 hours for them to do a urine drug screen on there. Those are very hard lines that you got to follow on there. So at the moment the accident happens, no matter where they're going, what they're doing, we're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Even on holidays, we are available. If anything happens, we are available. Just give us a number, call on our line, we'll be there. Okay, now we're going to go into reasonable suspicion testing here. Can be utilized when it's more than just a hunch on there. We got to start to look for the obvious signs of intoxication or influence, such as impaired speech, difficulty concentrating, trouble walking, strong odors of alcohol or marijuana, maybe nodding off. There are many, many more. We'll get into with the signs and symptoms on there. They start having patterns in behavior, like they have changes in mood. There's that hygiene again. Like I said, that is one of the biggest red flags when a person starts neglecting their hygiene. Something's going on. Change in temperament, increase in frequent breaks, and increased absenteeism. Who knows what the most important rules in any reasonable suspicion drug testing is? I'll tell you right now, it's document, document, document. Documentation is going to be your best friend. Here's the thing with documentation. The more documentation you have, the better it is. The more documentation you have, the more transparent you are. I'll never forget, this was years ago. We had an intern that was coming out of college, and she was doing her internship with us. And it was really cool because they paired her up with me, and she was showing her the ropes to the best of my ability. There was an incident happened. It was nothing major, nobody got hurt, anything like that. It was just small little running with the 2 clients there, so we documented it. She goes, do we even have to document that? I said, yeah, we have to document everything that happens in this building. So I said, okay, you write what you think, and I'm going to write mine. So anyhow, she writes like 3 sentences on there. I had like 2 paragraphs, and she looks at me and she goes, don't you think you document, maybe you over-document? I just looked at it, I said, oh, you are so adorable. You've never been challenged, have you? You've never been challenged by your boss. You've never been challenged by the courts, have you, with an incident? She goes, no. I said, wait till you get challenged the very first time something happened. Because what happened today, I'm not going to remember all the small little details 6 months from now. I said, but I tell you what, 6 months from now, I can tell you exactly what I did today, what happened today. She went, after she graduated, she went to work for another company, and she came back to work with us about a year after that. It was so cool because she saw me in the office one day. She came up, she said, thank you. I said, for what? She goes, you told me the importance of documentation. I said, well, why? What happened? There was an incident that happened, got challenged, not only by the clients there, but it also ended up into a court of law. She said, if I would not have had those documentation, I would have been found guilty, and I would have been proven wrong in this. She said, but I had all that documentation, and she thanked me for it. So documentation is extremely important in anything you do. So here's the thing with reasonable suspicion. You gotta look for an observed behavior such as direct observation of drug or alcohol use or the possession and or physical symptoms of drug and or alcohol use. So if you look out the window and you see somebody chugging a 5th of Jack Daniels walking across the parking lot, you witness that, that's direct observation. You can do, make sure you document that. That's reason enough for reasonable suspicion. Now, if she were to come up and say, oh, by the way, I saw something, well, you can't be your training supervisor. Somebody that's not, and says, hey, I saw somebody drinking, without having direct observation on it, you cannot do that reasonable suspicion test. You can't start using that, though, for the beginning of your observations on them. There's a pattern of abnormal conduct or erratic behavior. If there's arrest or conviction for a drug-related offense or identification of an employee as the focus of a criminal investigation into the illegal drug possession, use, or trafficking, the employee must notify the company within 5 working days of any drug-related conviction on there. There is information that's provided by either a reliable and credible source or independently corroborated regarding an employee's substance use. If there's newly discovered evidence the employee tampered with the previous drug or alcohol test. Reasonable suspicion testing does not require certainty. Mere hunches, however, do not justify testing. So to prevent this, managers and supervisors are trained to recognize drug and alcohol-related signs and symptoms on there. Here's the thing, it can be hard for an employer to address reasonable suspicion with an employee. Variety of reasons of it. Number one, we don't want to be wrong. Nobody likes to be wrong, including myself. Some people are non-confrontational. They don't want to confront anybody. They want no conflict, so they kind of like try to look the other way. The other thing is, may have a personal relationship. Maybe you and your spouse go out with them and their spouse, or you play on the same golf league or bowling league team or league or whatever it is on there. Another one is people are afraid of being with the retaliation. What are they going to do after this here? So, employers often request that a drug test be performed, but they do not specify that it's a reasonable suspicion. Here's the thing about it. In your policy, it states in there, you have it, the clause in there that says that you can't test for reasonable suspicion as long as you have documentable proof on that there. Another thing about that, reason we don't want to do that, we want to make sure that if it's a reasonable suspicion, no matter the outcome, we want to make sure that their behaviors, they're aware of what their actions and behaviors are that causes their. A lot of times that's enough to rattle somebody's cage, say, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this, maybe I'm not, being able to get away with it on there. So here's the thing. Sometimes it's pretty obvious when an employee shows up under the influence. They're slurring words, stumbling when they walk, maybe sluggish or incoherent, may spot a worker that's napping in the back somewhere. Maybe they're somewhat unresponsive and confused when our attempts are made to wake them up. Could be cornered by an employee who becomes easily agitated or aggressive. And when you attempt to calm them they are just disoriented and unable to make eye contact. Often, though, the signs and symptoms aren't that obvious. It's not that dramatic. Here's what we call that. We define this as a hunch. We say do not ignore it, but to explore it. And here's the thing, when you're doing an observation, you don't have to be in their space to do it. You don't have to be sitting next to them or standing in their space. You can do what's called a bird's eye view. You can observe them from a distance on there to start watching your observations of them there. So when it is more than just a hunch there, as a supervisor, you cannot test whomever you want, whenever you want, without exposing the city to some potential liability on there. So when you're faced with an employee whose behavior and often appearance lead you to suspect they are impaired on the job, it is recommended that you articulate and document first-hand observations to warrant the need for a reasonable suspicion test. Best practice, if you can get another trained supervisor, doing 2 independent observations and then coming together and collaborating on that and checking notes, matching notes against each other's on there. So if the supervisor feels the test is warranted and you can supply the proper documentation, testing should be done as soon as possible on that person there. And then when it says there to supply the proper documentation, that does not go to a drug collector, does not go to a collection company. That is for internal purposes only. The only reason the collector's coming out, they don't need to know anything except this is John Smith and he's being a reasonable suspicion test. They don't need to know the details or the particulars or anything like that. That is all internal there. The only thing the collector or the collection company needs to know is the person's name and the reason they're being tested. So there was a confusion on that in one place, and I just want to make sure that people understand that's not for us, that's for you guys. And if you feel an employee is under the influence, it's important you do not let them operate a vehicle or machinery at any time on there. So here's the thing about hearsay. You want to listen to all concerns regarding the employee from that person there. Second most important thing is you want to ensure or document the source of the information. The most important thing is you want to ensure confidentiality of that person. You're not going to go, hey, John, so-and-so thinks you're using whatever. You don't want to do that. Because if the person trusts you enough to tell you, you don't want to break that confidence on there. Here's the other thing about that. People that are working side by side each other, they're going to know a lot sooner than managers and supervisors up here because they don't get to work with them all the whole time. And think about it, when we're at work, we spend a lot of time with our coworkers. We get to know that coworker. So if they feel confident enough to come up to you, do not break their confidence on that there. That was one thing I liked the treatment when I was there. They always used to think I had eyes in the back of my head and ears, and they thought I maybe play at microphones and stuff like that, because I always knew what was going on in the facility, even if I wasn't in it. Because I would have a few people that were actually trying to do the right thing and change their lives, and they saw what the other things that the other clients were doing they didn't like or it was wrong. You know, and they would come and tell me that. So what I would do is I would wait a little bit and then I'd go and confront that person or start observing that person and do that on there. So if they feel confident, make sure you do not break their trust on that there. You do not test based upon hearsay alone, but you are going to use that information to start to observe that employee there. And testing is only going to be done based upon your documentable observations on there. Here's the thing, what if they say they have a reason for it, their behavior? 99.9% of the time they do not, in my experience there. Reasonable suspicion is put in place to help mitigate the harm to all employees. This is one of the reasons proper documentation is so important for you. And regardless if an employee tests positive or not, the unsafe behavior still needs to be addressed. HR can take over from that point on. The outcome of the actual test isn't as important as stopping that unsafe behavior. Never let an employee talk you out of the test for any reason. You're going to see why here in a second. I got a copy of a drug test from last year that a person tried to talk out. I can give you the backstory on it also on there. Once you start the process, it must continue. Do not, make sure it gets completed on there. Here's where you guys are going to be the rock star. You're going to be the healers. You're going to be the good guys on there. You're going to start to blame the policy. You're going to blame the city's policy. It's not you on there. We normally avoid conflict situations, but with reasonable suspicion, it's more important than ever to start to de-escalate the situation before words being said on there. So what you're going to do is you're going to focus your words on what you have seen, witnessed firsthand, what you've observed. You're not going to tell them, hey, this is what I'm assuming. You're going to tell them exactly what you witnessed on there. You're going to discuss the behavior you witnessed and your concern, not only for that employee, but also the fellow co-workers on there. And you're going to remind them that per the policy, you must rule out drug and alcohol use on there. So that's where you guys become the rock stars on there. And remember, never accuse anybody of being an addict or an alcoholic. Remember, you still have that law out there. It's called the Americans with Disability Act. And since addiction and alcoholism is considered a disease, it is considered a disability. So don't ever accuse anybody of that, even jokingly, because you could find yourself on the wrong end of some trouble there and you don't want to get into. Now, here's a copy of that drug test. This is from an employer down in Columbiana County. This is from 2022. That's a 17-panel drug test. Guy fell for 10 out of 17 drugs that were tested for on there. That's quite a bit. So the guy says, hey, you know, marijuana could have been laced with it. You say that in your trainings. You're right, marijuana could be laced with it. They also have what's called cutoff levels at the lab on there. And the back side of this, if you look right here, I said, yeah, well, I'm going to tell you what. The cocaine, the metabolite for cocaine is over 100,000 nanograms. That's a lot. That means that marijuana was not laced with cocaine on it. And besides, they had morphine in their system, they had methadone in their system, norfentanyl and fentanyl over there. I said, no, this wasn't laced right there. You could tell by that there. So that's this guy here, by the way. Guess what his job was? It was a manufacturing facility down in Columbiana. He was the overhead crane operator. And he drove tow motor when he wasn't up in the cab of the truck moving the material around. He was a tow motor operator. I would not want to be anywhere near this guy. He was pretty well rocked on there. But he tried telling his supervisor, I've been working so much overtime, I'm just going to go home. I'm tired. I need some sleep. Meanwhile, my collector's already there. It's the middle of the night. My collector calls to say, this is what's happening, what's going on. So let me talk to the supervisor. I knew the guy. So I told him, I said, hey, let me ask you one question. I know you don't want to test this guy tonight because you think he's tired. I said, let's look at this from a different perspective on here. How are you going to tell your boss that you're being charged twice for drug testing? He said, what? I said, well, yeah, we're going to test you for coming out tonight. I said, now we're going to charge you again for when we have to come back down and get it tomorrow to test it. I said, how, and I know the HR lady, she is, I don't want to say she's strict. She's the nicest lady in the world, but she is, this is the way it is from A to Z. There is no white, black, I mean, it's only white or black. It is what it is. There's no shades of gray with her. So I said, how are you going to explain to her that she's being charged twice for that? You know what she's going to do? He goes, yep. I said, they're already there. They got the equipment out. Take less than 5 minutes to test. And here was the end result. This is why the guy was trying so hard to get out of taking that drug test. He knew he was going to fail his drug test on there. So this is why we never let anybody talk us out of taking that drug test on there. So here's some signs and symptoms of drug abuse on here. And this is with marijuana. There's a slurred reaction, judgment errors, isolation from coworkers, confusion, forgetfulness, unclear thinking, depression, paranoia, and hallucinations, reduced productivity, absenteeism, and restlessness, loss of memory, bloodshot eyes, dilated pupil, lethargy of speech, apathy, and fatigue. Here's the two things that I noticed go hand in hand. I don't care what drug it is, whether it's liquid or solid form, whether it's drugs or alcohol, there's always two things common. Number one is if a person has a passion for something they really enjoy, hit an interest in like one of their hobbies or their favorite endeavors, and they start to lose interest in that, something's going on. Not like I said, it's not always drugs now. It could be something going on in the family or with the family members, but they start losing that. And the second one is paraphernalia, anything around there. Now, like on this one here, it could be a vape pen, it could be papers, it could be pipes, all kind of other stuff for that on there. Biggest one right now is the vapes going on. People are confiscating into that in there. Gummies, gummy bears, and some other of the edibles also that are coming out around on there. So with cocaine and crack cocaine, they have reduced or erratic productivity, decreased impulse controls. They become extremely impulsive. They don't think anything through on there. Once again, there it is, decreased interest in their hobbies and their endeavors or their passions on there. Some of the paraphernalia, and this also goes with methamphetamines and amphetamines there. It could be a needle, it could be a pipe, glass pipe, could be pieces of foil that are heat up or burn marks on the bottom of the foil because they are freebasing it. They're putting it in there and they're lighting it up and they're taking either a small piece of paper, a straw, rolled up dollar bill, stuff like that to inhale the fume or the smoke. Some of the other things could be a burnt spoon, something to tie this off with, needles. The other thing, and a lot of people don't realize, is when they cook in a spoon, they use a piece of cotton, whether it's cotton ball, Q-tip, or it could be a cigarette filter. They'll take small pieces, roll it up there, and use it as a filtration system as they're pulling it back into the needle. So one of the companies that I went in, and they were there, and I saw a couple of them there. I said, well, that's one of the first indicators right there. They didn't realize it. So those small pieces, a lot of times when they get so high on there, they forget about it, and that stuff drops, and they don't think to pick it back up. So that's another one of those things there. Increased risky decision making. They have illogical actions and responses. There's an unnatural weight loss system, and it's not a Jenny Craig or a Weight Watchers. It's called the STEM Fast diet on there. They have increased amounts of energy. Usually what will happen, it'll increase levels of energy. Then all of a sudden they start coming down off of it. And then they slow down. And then they maybe disappear in the bathroom or disappear out of sight for a few minutes. Now they've got this sudden burst of energy. They're like, going on there. That's usually because they just went in and got high on there. They have bloodshot eyes, paranoia, frequent nasal runs, rapid speech, and they can have some aggressive behavior on there. Now with the amphetamines and methamphetamines, another one here is pills. So prescription bottles, small baggies of pills there. Drastic decline in work performance. They're unable to retain new memories. They have illogical actions and responses to things. The continued decline in fluid, smooth motor function. There it is, drastic decrease of interest in personal hobbies and endeavors. Once again, the unnatural weight loss system comes back into play there. They have delayed or choppy speech. The inability to keep still. They're constantly like a little pinball. They're so hyper, they're like a pinball in a pinball machine going back and forth. They're also twitching. Another thing about it is there's, I believe, 650 different chemicals they can use to manufacture methamphetamines there. A lot of those chemicals cause involuntary muscle reactions and spasm. So if a person goes in, say the bathroom, or comes out of another room, and they just got high, they'll start doing this number here. That's a sign that they're having involuntary muscle spasms on there. They have skin picking, which leading to open sores. It's predominantly on the face because that's imaginary blackhead or ingrown hair that they're trying to dig out that they can't get out because it's not there. Will migrate down to the other arms and legs and stuff like that, but you can actually see it. I don't have pictures. I used to have a slide of pictures of some arrests from this, but I had to block the face out, and you could see what happened with it. I actually had a girl that I had to pink slip into the psych ward one night when we were sitting there. She went into a drug-induced coma. Drug-induced psychosis there. She actually saw spiders crawling underneath her skin. She grabbed one of the little plastic butter knives and tried to cut them out. That was a scary moment for me in time there. I hope I never have to witness that ever again. Then we have PCP or angel dust. It's not commonly used with regular frequency, therefore users don't often show the long-term signs of it. Repeat use can lead to reduced memory retention. I think this is why it is not as popular as it was back in the 70s. Repeat users have a higher rate of schizophrenic diagnosis later in life. A lot of confusion, delirium, complete detachment from reality, slurred speech, loss of coordination, and they can become extremely violent and aggressive on there. Benzodiazepines and barbiturates, these are going to be mostly in pill forms there. Depression, mood swings, agitation, irritability, decreased anxiety. They have slurred speech, sluggishness, dizziness, respiratory depression, sleepiness, slow pulse, slow breathing, can lead to respiratory arrest. They have visual problems where it's blurry or double vision and coming in and out of focus on them there. They're unable to urinate, dilated pupils, decreased motor control, poor concentration, and lack of coordination. And here's signs and symptoms of the opiates. And if you look down here, that's that little piece of cotton I'm talking about. That's not a real spoon with that, but I kind of made that up just to show. But that there is the small piece of cotton in there that most people, some people overlook there. They have consistent fatigue and lethargy, lowered motivation, delayed decision making. They're unable to retain new memories. They can tell you what they did 15 days ago. They don't remember what they did 15 minutes ago on there. Once again, the drastic decrease in interest in personal hobbies and interests there. Severe constipation, extreme sweating. They have pinpoint or constricted pupils. They're nauseous, even a sip of water, and they're throwing it up. They cannot keep that down. They have collapsed veins or skin abscesses. And for the people that don't know what a skin abscess is, it's an intravenous drug user that misses the vein, shoots either into tissue or muscle, and it causes some pretty nasty abscesses on their skin or their body there. Signs and symptoms of alcohol use. Lowered inhibition. They start doing or saying things they otherwise would not, or some people refer to it as liquid courage on there. Lowering of caution. Loss of fine motor coordination. The inability to drive a car or do a complex task. They have slurred speech. They become too loud or too fast at the speech there. Lowered reasoning abilities, they have weakened balance, loose muscle tone, slurred reaction time, their staggering walk or the inability to walk. They have a weakened sense of hearing. The more intoxicated a person becomes, the lower their sense of hearing is. That's why they're constantly yelling, because they think you can't hear either. They have loss of memory, both short and long term, heavy sweating, anxiety, restlessness, total mental confusion, slurred pupil response. After more drinks, the pupils do become constricted there, glossy appearance to their eyes, blurry or double vision, nauseous and vomiting, and loss of consciousness on there. And I love this here when they say the eyes have it. The lighter the color of the eyes, the better it is. But with constricted pupils, it's heroin, morphine, oxycodone, fentanyl, methadone, codeine, and hydrocodone. Red or bloodshot eyes is marijuana, cocaine, or crack. Benzodiazepines, such as Xanax. Depressants like alcohol or sedatives. Then you have the dilated pupils, or the saucer eyes as they're called there, which is amphetamines, methamphetamines, cocaine or crack. Hallucinogens like LSD and mushrooms, opiate, prescription painkillers, heroin, marijuana, and speed. Here's the thing with, like I said, the lighter color of the eye, the better it is you can see their pupils. But what if you come across a person that has darker eyes, you can't see real good on there? What I do, and I have done, there's a couple different things. One is I let them know that I'm predominantly right-handed, so they see me speak. What I will do is, as I'm getting ready to walk by them, I will make sure that I switch hands, make sure they're aware that I switch hands, and I'll walk by them and I'll see the natural movement of their eyes. So if they're following me normally, chances are they are not under there. The other thing is I will take my glasses off, or you can go up and I'll say, hey, I got something in the corner, Mike, can you tell me what it is? Our human response, our normal, natural response is to help somebody. So if somebody says, hey, I got something in my eye, our first response is to look and see if there's something in their eye. That way, you're not drawing any suspicion to yourself that you think they are under the influence when you want to check their pupils. I did that with my kids. That worked really great with my kids on that. So here's 10 very simple, easy rules to follow on any reasonable suspicion testing. One is document the heck out of it. Document as much as you possibly can on there. Number 2, you're going to call it what it is. You're not going to say this is random or anything like that. You're going to call it what it is. Number 3, it's got to be more than just a hunch, so you do have to articulate on that. Number 4, it's contemptuarities, meaning the observations occurred just before, during, or after their work period. Number 5, make sure that you ensure their confidentiality at this point. So if you think you have a person that's under the influence and you're doing a reasonable suspicion, just like you're going to ensure the confidentiality of the person that told you, now you're going to ensure the confidentiality of that person as well. So you're not going to go announce it or anything like that. It's all going to be done in private. Trust me, that person's going to go ahead and blab it all over, but we don't do that. We're going to ensure their confidentiality as well on there. Get a second supervisor to document their observations if possible on there. Once a process starts, it's got to be completed. Don't stop midstream, don't do anything like that. And only trained supervisors can request a reasonable suspicion test. Remember, you want to de-escalate the situation from the start, very start of it. So you're going to blame the policy amongst other things on you. Like I said, never accuse anybody, never approach them aggressively, anything like that. Don't say, hey, I'm assuming this is what you're doing. You know, state the facts on there, but you're going to blame the policy and say, hey, for the policy, we have to do this. It's not my choice, but I have to do it. Like I always used to tell people all the time, I don't make the rules. My job is to ensure they're being followed. That was my only job, and that's how I got away, or not, I don't want to say I got away. How I took a lot of the blame, or people accused me and treated me of that. I said, I don't make the rules. You got a problem with rules, go see somebody higher up the food chain than I. My job is to follow the established rules that they already have set in place on there. And 10, got to be fair, firm, consistent. So what you do for one, you must do for all. You're not going to say, well, I like this guy here, so I'm just going to let his behaviors, or I'm going to let this slide. Well, this guy, I don't really care for him, so I'm going to test this guy. If you're going to let this guy slide, you got to let that guy slide. So you don't want to have unsafe work environments, so you're going to test this guy as well as that. So whatever you do for one, you got to do for all on there. So here's what drug abuse is actually costing today. Drug abuse costs employers upwards of $81 billion each year. These monetary losses are due to higher turnover rates, reduction in productivity, workplace theft, higher absenteeism, more sick time use, and a lower quality of work. Remember when I said that 75% of Americans are struggling with an addiction, are currently in the workforce? Out of that 75% of substance abusers that remain employed, more than 42% admit that their work productivity suffers due to their use. They will admit it right up front. Yeah, I know my work productivity stinks, but on there. So more than 70% of employers reported that prescription drug misuse is having an impact on their workplace, according to a result from the National Safety Council. And in addition, 71% of employers agreed that prescription drug misuse is a disease, but 65% of those employers reported they would fire somebody who has a drug problem on there. So the employer's responsibility is increased need of reasonable suspicion training for all supervisors to understand signs and symptoms of use. If you guys have any questions, I'll leave my card with my number. Do not be afraid to call me or anything like that. Educate your employees on the company's marijuana use policy on there, and understand that the mentality about drug testing and addiction starts from the top down. Provide a true open door policy. Remove that stigma that is associated with recovery and an addiction. Offer employees one chance to seek help or treatment. Let your office be a safe place to talk about the issues, and whatever is talked about in that office stays in that office there. Increase communications and provide resources in your community. If anybody needs any resources, I'm really good about finding the resources. Working with one of our national companies, and the guy I was talking to was in Des Moines, Iowa. We were discussing what was going on in Las Vegas, Nevada, at one of his companies over there. So what ended up happening was, by the time I got off the phone, I had pulled enough resources. I told him, I said, Doug, and probably about 5-10 minutes, you're going to be getting an email from me to keep an eye out for it. He's, okay. I told him, I said, I got resources out in Las Vegas, Nevada for you to already use. So if I can be on the East Coast fighting with resources on the West Coast, I'm very good about finding them around here. We've got to remember the drug-free policies are literally saving lives. The importance of the drug-free policy is creating safer work environments, helping to identify personal problems that can get better with treatment on there. Train supervisors and employees get clarification if needed. Encourage the use of a one-chance policy instead of a zero-tolerance policy. Have an open-door policy and encourage others to do the same on there. And have a list of local resources for employees, which I can get for you if you need. And ask questions and become informed. And with that being said, does anybody have any questions? Everybody understands the signs and symptoms of okay, if I wasn't clear on that, please let me know. I want to make sure that you guys have been through this enough that you already have seen. Plus, you get to see it out on the street a lot more than others. So, if you guys don't have any questions or anything, you're more than free to go. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, number one,